everyone, and welcome to Wedding Photography Weekly, the weekly Q&A podcast. A lot of things to kind of hit off the top here that were not officially questions, but things that I think that I should cover. I am kind of split testing the R6 and the Z5 for wedding and hybrid coverage. My brief synopsis of this right now is that the Z5, the Nikon Z5, definitely fits a hole in the market and will save you so much money and also weight. The Z6, however, the autofocus and low light of it is just absolutely insane. So if you're interested in that, you might have to look at the R6. They're both fantastic cameras, but the Canon side of things comes with a lot of extra weight and a lot of extra future cost, as well as just buying lenses. Stuff is just, at least right now, way more expensive over there. It is coming around. The 85 f2 is coming out, I think, in November. There's already a 35 1.8, and it's very interesting to see these two systems evolve together. I think that Nikon did it correctly with building all of the 1.8 primes and getting things out there into the market that are a reasonable price point. I feel like that was the right thing to do, but then Canon obviously had to differentiate from that, and they did the 1.2 glass, which as a wedding photographer and as a bit of a bokeh junkie, I definitely was intrigued by, and that's why I'm shooting the 85 as my main camera today. We're theoretically going to another helicopter elopement today, but it's right now it's foggy and it's supposed to thunderstorm later today, so I'll make a video we get to go, because as far as nervous energy goes, I would say this is the most nervous energy I've had about one of these helicopter elopements, and I've actually packed a bag in case we get stuck there overnight on the island, because there's nothing on that island. So I have a bunch of jackets and some like Cliff Bars and stuff, because it's like potential luxury survival mode sleeping in a helicopter. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope it thunderstorms, basically, for those that are not airline pilots, I guess. I have my pilot's license, which is a fun fact, I guess. Thunderstorms, rain, not a huge deal. Lightning, it sucks, but it's not the most destructive thing. But if we're out on the island and some hail starts coming down on the helicopter and on the rotors, it's going to be a problem. So if that does look like a potential problem, I'm sure we're not going to fly, but there is an element of risk to it. So I'm taking it pretty seriously today. So yeah, if you want to submit a question for this podcast, you have to be a member in the members group and then come on over to the members Facebook group. So there's a link in the description below for that. And every week, I know I missed a week, I screwed this recording up because the Canon R6 is new to me, and the preamp comes default cranked like all the way. And I was like, oh cool, like my audio level's here. And then I listened back to it and it's just like mostly hiss. So maybe a note, keep the preamp around half or less, maybe, especially if you have a good microphone like I'm using the Rode NTG right now, I guess the video mic NTG, so the small one that fits in your camera. But then I'm also running this backup that I didn't do last time, and I feel like an idiot because I recorded for an hour and it's all unusable. So this is part 2. Thanks for not harassing me too much, because I did record this last week and then I just didn't have a chance to re-record it until now. First question. Can you share with us the Facebook ad process for wedding photography? Business engagement is well updated for 2020. I will be doing this in a proper video at some point, but as of right now, in the Elopements course that came out a couple of weeks ago, if you remember, you have access to it. In the Elopements course, I run through Facebook boosted posts, so I didn't do an actual ad. I go through boosts, but it's most of the same functionality, target the same way. But then I did go through the Facebook ad manager for the Instagram ads. So I did that. Check out the Elopements course. I think it's in part 3 of it. There's like kind of a few different parts of it. It's in the part where we're actually kind of setting everything up. And then as far as, I guess, Facebook ads in general, Facebook, the entire look and feel of everything has just changed. So I'm curious to see kind of how that does. And I'm looking at my results now based on past results. Essentially what Facebook has become is, if you're on desktop, I feel like it's just become an ad platform now, that you see some of your friends' content, but for the most part, it's just all advertising. So I'm interested to see how the engagement of that kind of plays out, I guess, long term. Definitely not like a MySpace situation. MySpace, basically, it was the pinnacle of everything. I guess the team that was in charge of it sold it off to a huge media conglomerate, made a bunch of money. I think they stayed golden handcuffed into the project for a little while, but eventually, at some point, because they were writing so much, like all the code started out okay, and then they just kept patching it over and over again. So they made a really, just in general, difficult system to use. And then there was a lot of vulnerabilities as far as spam goes as well, and spammers just kind of took over. So I don't foresee that happening with something like Facebook, but that was kind of my take on the progression of MySpace. And I feel like this was a similar feeling when I logged in. I'm like, oh, it's just all ads now, and like very, very scattered content. Obviously, if this pushes a lot of people away from the platform, they're going to reevaluate the situation and hopefully fix it. But that's kind of my take right now. Sam asks, what is my favorite pizza topping? I don't know what my favorite pizza topping is. I'm boring. I just go cheese. We're thinking of starting a pizza and photography show, so maybe that might be, maybe I'll get more in detail over a multi-episode series to answer your question. But I would say I'm pretty boring. I guess pepperoni, I like cheese, that's about all. Ryan Vance asks, what business strategies would you put in place to be prepared in case another 2020 ever happened? So as far as kind of the weddings or the photography side of things, I'm not gonna speak to how you could just have pivoted your entire business into something else, like just making face masks, and you could have been quite rich by this point, had you started doing that early. But in the wedding photography and in the photography space, I think what a lot of us kind of did was correct, that we saw that the wedding market was disappearing and quickly kind of jumped into the more commercial side of things and just things that we wouldn't normally pursue, because a lot, or at least myself, I've become very kind of laser focused on weddings, and I'll either refer out or turn down a lot of commercial work now because I just want to, weddings are fun for me, and I want to keep doing that. So I turned down a lot of stuff that I would usually do. In early, even like February, I was kind of starting to see signs of this, and that a lot of businesses, they obviously did not knew exactly what was coming, but a lot of businesses knew that they had to up their social presence. So at that point, it was very easy to sell people because businesses were still actually making money and doors were open. It became a lot easier to sell people on actually the course that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks now in September, which is all about just creating social media content for businesses. It's commercial photography content, I guess, but in a package that you can sell very easily through kind of a one sheet and through a couple of emails to local businesses that you can come in, you can create all of their digital assets for them. And there's even an element to it if you want to become the full social media manager, you can, but personally for me, I like doing the content side of things. I don't like doing the actual implementation of that content. So yeah, that'll be coming out all in September. I'm not sure officially what the launch date is yet, but it will exist at some point in September. I would say if in the future this ever happens again, that would be kind of the course that I would go back to. And I would just essentially figure out what opportunities exist and what people need, and figure out ways that I can fill that gap. And whether that is directly photography related or video related or social media related, that there's lots of different opportunities. And if you kind of have your ear to the ground in this, in the social space, and you're obviously taking business and marketing pretty seriously by even just being in the group, that you probably have a lot of advanced skills that a lot of other business owners just never think about, especially bricks and mortar shops. There's just so many more variables that go into them operating a business that they don't really have time to necessarily sit down and learn everything that we can learn as photographers. So you probably have a lot of skills and a lot of help that that you don't realize, because you kind of live in this space where it seems like everybody knows all this stuff, but the truth is that no one really knows this stuff, and it's not that common knowledge. Siobhan says, how do you go about contacting people for style shoots, looking for groups on Facebook, Instagram? What is the best way to approach this? Introverted like you, was wondering how you dealt with this while building a portfolio. I kind of just started with the people that I knew the best, that if I had even one person that worked at a venue, or one person that worked at, in my case, restaurants, that I would kind of figure out what I could do within that. So just to begin the portfolio building process, if you've already done some weddings at different venues, I would say reaching out to them is an easy place to start as well. That as long as you have past work, you can send them the gallery of images and be like, hey, and also can I do a shoot here on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. before you guys open? Will only be an hour. And if you can start doing things like that, I would say that that's the best way that I would say to build your portfolio. You can also do that by just going out, and like, you don't need a venue to do that. If you can find a couple, if you can find somebody wearing a wedding dress, or you can convince someone to wear a wedding dress, which is what I did, I would say that that's a really good way to go about it. The other way to go about it, maybe considered more gray by some photographers, but you can actually just set up full like portfolio workshops. So if you're looking at a style shoot and you're like, wow, it's going to be like quite expensive to bring in dresses and to bring in models, and that you can set something up that's maybe outside of your city that you invite other photographers to. So for instance, for me, living now out of Toronto, I would have no problem running a portfolio workshop like this in Toronto and kind of sharing the cost with a few other photographers. So maybe 5 of you come together to spend some money to build this. And that's something that you can kind of build the framework to and then just market it. And that could, I don't know, quite honestly, become like another little side business. But if you're doing it at home, you're going to very much start to confuse people if they're comparing you to other local individuals and they're seeing the same images on a lot of sites or the same setups or whatever it might be. So I would say do that at least a little further from home. And when you market it, I would just do the Facebook targeted ad and just not include wherever I actually live. That would be the way that I would go about it. Otherwise, just connecting with other local vendors that are in the same boat as you, that are, if it's a florist and they're year number 1, that they have just begun their business and they want to get more involved in the community. If you can find a bunch of people like that to all collaborate on projects, it's going to be a really great experience for everyone, and everyone's going to be hyper motivated to do an amazing job. So I would say if those people exist, like, they're harder to find obviously because they're not established, but if you can find people that have at least started kind of that process, that's probably the best way to go about that. Teddy asks, what is the most strange or funny thing that's happened to you as a wedding? I get nervous that I'm not recording on my backup a lot. So for the strange or funny thing that's happened at a wedding, I haven't been through too many horror stories, so I don't have any like bad wedding stories, which is probably a positive thing. The craziest thing I think that happened to me was, it would have been maybe 7 years ago now in Toronto. A couple flies in from Switzerland. They live in Switzerland. Their family's all Toronto. They're here for, I think, 4 days. The sister of the bride is super pregnant, I think like 8 months at that point. She's the only maid of honor, so there's two of the girls in the wedding party, the bride and maid of honor, on their side. And during hair and makeup, her sister goes into labor and doesn't tell the bride. It's just like, oh, cool. So the sister works at a hospital downtown Toronto, so I think it was her first child, but she's at least aware of kind of how the process goes and maybe things that could be red flags. So she literally sits there during hair and makeup. I think she lets the hair and makeup artist know, like, hey, here's the situation. If I'm being weird, it's probably why. Sits through hair and makeup. After that, I do some getting ready photos. I don't know this at this point. And then she heads out for about an hour. And we were supposed to do some kind of bridal party getting ready photos, and she was just like, gotta go, sorry. And I think that at this point the bride kind of knew what happened, but wasn't really asking too many questions. So her sister goes to the hospital, I guess gets checked out by like her team and manages to uncheck herself out to come back, comes to University of Toronto for the wedding. They do the wedding ceremony. She comes actually to the photo session. We just do the family photos first while she's literally in labor. We do the family photos first, and then she goes to the hospital and gives birth to her child, who I think by like 5:30 or 6 p.m. that day everything was just fine, and she did her speech by speakerphone. So 7:30 at night it was a BlackBerry, her dad's BlackBerry, giving her speech, her maid of honor speech from a hospital bed after giving birth. So that was a very sitcom moment, and I don't think that maybe that could be a movie. I feel like that could be a movie. Cody asks, do I use Backblaze or Crashplan for offsite backing? Do you choose any? So I don't personally use either. I use a collection of drives as well as kind of online backup with SmugMug for JPEGs. I don't do the raw files. For video, I currently just use Dropbox. It's very simple. I just put like all my video raw files there, but I don't use Backblaze or Crashplan for that. And can you create a video showing your full photomechanic process from culling to importing into Lightroom? That might be the most boring video, unfortunately. All I do is I open up Photomechanic and I just tag anything I want to keep with one. And if I know at that point it's something that I might put on social media, or if I'm doing a blog post, I'll tag it with a second color, second number. But that said, I'll usually go through everything and just select by one. I do it the way that I make the selects, rather than, you can do it the opposite way where you select everything and you unselect as you go. I select things individually just by numbers, just going through really quickly. And then I'll usually come back at the end and I'll select all of my favorites. I find it's easier to separate that process if I'm trying to go through and I'm like, oh, but what one's like the best one that I want to put on social media, and that slows me down. So I just make my selects, get back to the beginning, sort by all of those so that only the ones that are red or whatever are showing, and then I go through and I make my additional kind of advanced selects from that. That's about all, unfortunately. Actually, there might be a video, it might be from 2007, but it's still the exact same process, sadly. Lucas says, on top of your homepage, was that tree, or was the tree of the lights, or did I have a flash in there too? So what Luke's talking about, I have a photo up on my website that's under kind of a tree with some lanterns. And no, I didn't light that. That's all just lit naturally by the lanterns. And you can see by the fact that there's like electrical lines and stuff in that shot that it was really just kind of as the day was. They just kind of walked towards there. We were like, hey, we should do some photos with these trees before it gets too dark. Knowing now what I know, I probably would have brought them out maybe a little bit more in blue hour. I don't remember if there was something going on that I wasn't able to do that, but I would kind of find that 10-minute blue hour. It was also, I think it was an October wedding, so maybe blue hour was like 6 minutes, and maybe I did that and I failed. But I would say if you're ever doing anything that you want those ambient nice lights, to go and I would say maybe begin that photo session in the middle of blue hour, so that you're able to, blue hour by the way is like sometimes 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. But I would say start that at that point so you get that nice ambient mix with kind of the blue sky still, or the kind of that weird neon blue sky. I think that's a really nice look, rather than just straight up nighttime. So that's something I would have changed, but worked out pretty well overall. Canyon says, averaging 15 or so weddings a year. That's amazing. Congratulations. How do I break into the 30 or 60 wedding market? I'm sure you have a video on it. So I would say the biggest stepping point from this would be to start really talking hard with venues and to become a preferred vendor at the places that you think, one, would be willing to accept you, and maybe also that they're, like, by willing to accept you, I mean basically that they don't already have 10, 15, 20 people on their list. The other thing that I would focus on is if there are any venue groups that manage multiple different venues, I would do my best to get in with them. That was one of the big things for me, and one of the big ways that you can release the anxiety of constantly every single year like booking a full new wedding season, that they will kind of pad that out. And I obviously there are no guarantees, but I would say on average, if you're a preferred vendor at a venue, you're probably going to end up there maybe 5-10 times a year. So if you can get 2 or 3 of those, for the most part, at least here, they're non-competitive. So say for instance, like I'm a preferred vendor down the street here, other venues have no problem whatsoever putting me on their list, which is kind of cool. So I don't know if that's, hopefully that's a thing that's global to everyone, but you can be a preferred vendor at multiple different venues and also be promoting multiple different venues. And if anything, I feel like there might be a psychology thing in there that rather than them like cutting you off, that they're going to work harder to get you more weddings so you can feature more of their thing. I feel like that's at least kind of the way that I've seen it go. It could obviously go the other way where venues are just maybe like very protective and they're very much like, we are the best, we accept no one else in our community. So there is that possibility, but I would say most venues err on the side of the fact that they know if you can be generating more content for them, creating more work for them, that they're going to find that they get paid more money overall and they book more weddings. So hopefully that connects, but I would say that would be the way that I would go about it. And also just contacting them and setting up styled shoots so you can have, one, you can build portfolio out of it, but 2, you actually get to communicate more with the staff and they can see how cool you are to work with. Andrew says, hey Taylor, I have been thinking about offering some kind of referral incentive for couples where they get a gift Amazon card voucher for referring a friend or family member. So I think it's a great idea. I would say the way that we've done it is not through any sort of monetary gift or anything like that, but we just offer up family sessions or couple sessions or whatever it might be. We give them the gift of photography. So if say for instance somebody refers me for their wedding or for their sister's wedding or whatever, and their sister books, at that point I usually just email the couple that referred it, and I will say like, hey guys, like thank you so much for telling X whoever about me, and I'm like, I would love to do a family shoot complimentary with you guys, like 50 images, any weekday evening or Sunday, just like let me know when you'd like to do it, if you'd like to do it. And I would say half the people, everybody says like, amazing, thank you so much for the offer. I would say 50% of the people actually will take me up on that eventually at some point. And then also if you follow them on Instagram, maybe just see where they're at kind of in the family life cycle, that if they already have a kid, maybe just be like, hey, saw that you just had a baby, love to do a baby shoot, love to do a maternity shoot if they're still pregnant, or whatever it might be. That if you have a little bit of that visibility, I don't know, like the people I find that have referred one person usually refer 5 people kind of over a lifetime or even more. And then the people that love their photos and then just kind of stay silent for referrals in the future. They might even be on the mindset of like, oh, like we don't really want anyone else to have you because our photos are so good. So if you're not receiving referrals, it's not necessarily a negative thing. Like, it's not that they hate your work. It might be that they like your work too much that they don't want to tell anyone and they're being a little bit selfish. But yeah, I would do the gift of photography for them. It saves you money, and I feel like it's a more personal experience, and you can cultivate that relationship a little bit more as well. That said, maybe there's nothing wrong with doing both. If you send them a gift certificate for a restaurant or whatever. I feel like experiences are kind of, I would say, better gifts in general. So I would probably err on that side, giving them something to do, or if there's vineyards or whatever in your local area, if you can give them kind of like a wine tasting experience or something. Like there's I think options to get them out as a couple. I feel like they'll probably appreciate, and hopefully that will result in even more referrals for you. John says, where shade is unavailable and direct sun spots are unavoidable, do you have any tips on saving them in the edit? So I would say the way that I usually go about in general, so I walk into a field, it's a very nice day today with all this fog. I walk into a field, it's hot sun. Even if the sun is at 12 noon, so it's like directly above you, there's always a direction that everyone can face that is, at least their face is in the shade. So I'm always looking for that. And there's usually a way, and sometimes it takes it's an annoying process to do, but you can eventually get people to a point that there's just like no sun here. If they have blonde hair or their shaved head, it becomes even more challenging. Maybe get a circular polarizer and see if that takes some of the shine away. But there is always a way that you can kind of position people so their faces are in the shade, and I am always looking for that. And the other benefit is that usually if their face is in the shade and there's a deck of trees back here, even if it is a little spotty, for the most part the trees are also going to be in the shade. And if you can find, if their face can be in the shade and the background can be in the shade, the image comes together so much better. I've stolen this completely from Cliff Montner. Cliff is a fantastic photographer out in New Jersey, and he came here, I'm gonna say maybe 10, 12 years ago, and did a workshop locally here. And pretty much like my takeaway from that was that that's the thing, that if somebody's face is in the shade and the background's in the shade, the image just compresses and comes together so much nicer than if you're just shooting a portrait and the background's hot and it's all blown out. So if you can find that background, that is like by far the best way to take that image, even though it's always going to be not your best work, but that's the best you can kind of do within that situation. And then in the actual edit, I would say just like be very, very, it's almost, you have to figure one out. So I would probably even resort, if it was just like I don't know what to do, try the auto button and see how close that gets you, because the auto button is actually used to dealing with just like the most difficult situations. Sometimes it does a pretty good job, and you can kind of refine the edit from there. And then I would also say make sure you're shooting everything in, well, one, in RAW, obviously, which I'm sure you are, but two, also in manual, so that everything is very consistent, so you're able to just kind of batch that correction across the board rather than changing white balances or whatever it might be. So I would say that would kind of be my suggestion for it. It's more so, I guess, on the pre side of things before you actually even take the image, hopefully. So yeah, that would be my advice. Steve says, for 21 weddings with 100 guests, if the people is forced down to 30, do I give a discount? I guess people would want one. So you can actually put in some sort of, I'm still treating every single wedding case by case basis. I feel like it's still such an evolving situation that it really is challenging for me to just kind of do a blanket clause. But I would say anyone booking a wedding now, and if they're booking a wedding beyond what the limits are right now, there is some element of risk, and I think that you should at least have some sort of written communication that like they agree that they are, like, if this changes, like you're still like accountable, and you will, like, this package is the package that you're purchasing. And then also if they have to change dates or anything like that as well, that you can put something in about that. I'll try to get some wording and put that in the, I'll make a post about it on the actual the page eventually. But I think it's such a changing situation, and every situation is so different, that I would just make sure that you both know you're kind of on the same page, that if you see that, like, oh cool, you're booking a wedding for 2 months from now and there's 150 people and our current like local capacity is 50 people, maybe you're going to be a little bit more kind of like, hey, so you are accountable for this package, and if this does need to change, here are the options. Like, we can break hours out into a future family session or a future couple session or a future reception coverage if they have to have an additional reception. But just make sure it's like it's a good deal for you, that you're not going to be completely upset if that does end up happening. And then just put it in writing in the contract somewhere. Lucas says, do you consider useful advertising specific wedding websites? So I think for like Wedding Wire and whatnot, in Canada, at least, it is not so good. In the States, I've heard different things. I've heard that people have booked full seasons from it, but then I've also heard that people say that it's the biggest waste of money that they've ever spent. Same with pretty much any of those directory-based websites. And I would say from my personal experience, in the very beginning, when I was very, very low cost, I had some success with it. As I priced up to kind of what I should be, I found significant less success, if even ever, booking another wedding from any of those websites. So I would say, depending on where you're at in your career, it might be worth it if you want to get that lower level work coming in the door. I would say, as far as like, if there's maybe a higher end wedding magazine that's a little bit more difficult to get into, that might be an option. What I've discovered, at least from our local area, so we have I guess we have two magazines. So we have one called Wedding Bells, which is, I think, Canada-wide, and they're awesome because they have so many large advertisers, like makeup companies and whatnot, that they don't actually need photographers and vendors to give them money, that they have all these big contracts and they're kind of good. So I love the way that operates, because they don't need anything from you. Where there's other magazines in the luxury market, there's Wedlux. I think Wedlux is in the States now as well. That if you pay to be part of kind of their glitterati or their wedding team or whatever it is, the main benefit, I would say, is you're spending a lot of money usually to get that half-page ad or whatever it is to become one of their vendors. But a lot of those wedding magazines will also require that if there is a styled shoot done, that 6 of the 10 vendors have to be from like the advertising pool, the people that pay them money in order for this thing to run. So you will get involved in new and interesting projects by higher end individuals if you are part of this kind of like this subgroup of luxury wedding vendors that are paying to be part of this. So there is value in that, I think, but again, that's like kind of weird gray area. Like, I guess morally, or if you're fine with doing that, then that's awesome, and I think it will unlock opportunities, but it really is kind of a weird situation, I guess, overall. And I would suspect that a lot of other wedding magazines operate in a similar way, if not kind of exactly the same. Jennifer asks, on hybrid, I know if you just hit the record button on the EOS R, so this is due to my my struggles with the R6 being a hybrid camera. So basically the way that it comes down to is that if you purchase a Canon R6 and you want to do hybrid with it, you have to actually spin the wheel on the top. So Nikon, it's awesome. Like on the Z5, you're either in photo mode, you're in video mode. Canon, you come back to the wheel on the Z6 and or the R6, and you have to move it, which is fine in theory, but on a wedding day, I'm not sure how easy it is to make that adjustment because the wheel spins in all different directions. So you have to be very aware of what mode you're in. Maybe not a problem for you. I suspect it might be a bit of a struggle. On the Canon R, you're able to map, so whatever your C3 settings are, basically you can set manual video to that, so that whenever you just hit the button, there's just a record button on the camera, but when you hit it on the R6, it just goes into automatic movie mode, which you don't control f-stop or shutter speed or white balance or anything, which is a bit of a problem obviously for hybrid folks. If you're on the Canon R, you can set your C3 button to be manual video settings, and when you hit record, you'll have recording proper settings, and you can change shutter speeds and white balances and whatnot if you want. So that is cool with the R. The RP does not have that, and the R6 does not have that. So if you want to be able to very easily just hit the record button rather than changing the thing and hitting record, you can either get the Canon R5 or I guess a Canon R as well. So that is one reason why I'm kind of considering going with the R next year if Canon does prevail, the winner of my own personal challenge here. So DeWitt says, sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, what are the best forms of ads when starting a wedding photography business, not including word of mouth? I would say, so I like the second part, please consider making a top 5 list. I would say for you to make a top 5 list of ways that you can help out other people, like anyone getting married in your local area. So whether that is a top 5 list for couples getting married at this venue, or top 5 suggestions for people getting married at like in this city, or top 5 engagement session locations, or top 5 wedding photography locations, or whatever it might be, I would say by making those headlines are very easy to click. And even though I'm telling everyone this now, that there's a very small chance that anyone else that is watching this is in your specific market. So if you are the one building out all of this content, easy way, I guess, is also to just go to wedding magazines and see what content is getting the most amount of shares, and then tailor that title to be something locally specific, and then run ads at that. You'll find that one, you're gonna get a significant number more of shares, and then at the end of the day, you're going to become the helpful photographer that's there to help your couples. And I feel like that converts a lot better than just sending people to your website. So I would say top 5 lists, or even just like any sort of helpful training articles. It's everyone's pretty much first time getting married. So the more that you can help walk them through that process, the happier that they're going to be, and the more likely they're going to be to book you. All right, Daniel says, what considerations do you take into account when selecting a lighting system? Interested in why you went third-party Godox over native Nikon. So Godox versus Nikon speedlights, there really is no comparison. Godox is so much better. ProPhoto, so I guess I'm like also gray area, kind of weird to recommend the V1 when it's like kind of clearly and also legally now in a battle with ProPhoto about their A1. I would say I went third party simply because, one, Godox, the lithium ion battery, is just so much better than using, like, as far as recharge time goes, as far as how long it lasts, like it just lasts forever, and it's always ready to just, like, how much light do you need? No problem. So I think that was good. The other thing that I really liked about Godox was when I was using Nikon speedlights, I was going through Pocket Wizards, and they would work most of the time, but there were still issues and weird things. The Godox system just works all of the time for me, and I've never had any issues with it. And then also you can kind of add multiple different levels of Godox things to a very easy to use and also very inexpensive tool, like the controller that you can basically set up anything that you want. And I feel like they're doing a very, very good job. I feel like Nikon just kind of stopped like producing, they just stopped caring with the speedlight market, I guess. And then, yeah, so that's the main reason why I went Godox over Nikon. And I would say that ProPhoto or Godox would be my suggestion, regardless of what camera system you shoot, that they make just fantastic stuff. Next question, Cody says, on your elopements course, after you announce the winners, do you individually email everyone? So what Cody's talking about, if you went through the elopements course, the way everything's structured out, you get a lot of leads. Do you email all of them individually? I was emailing everyone as they came in. So if I got a lead, I would say like, hey, thanks so much for entering. Like, it sounds like you're having quite a struggle, depending on the level of struggle they're going through with this year. And I would reach out at that point and send them an actual personal message after the giveaway. And then you can also, if you're doing a live giveaway on like Instagram or something, you can point people to like, hey, next Tuesday, 7 p.m. I'm doing this live. And then a lot of those leads are going to go over and they're going to follow you on Instagram as well. So that, again, not only do you have their email, so you're able to market to them in the future again, but you also have them now following you on Instagram, which is even more likely that they're going to potentially book you or whatever it might be for the wedding day. So I would say it is definitely a good thing to be following up with everyone, to be like, hey, sorry, like if you didn't catch the live stream, here's who won. But if you would like to consider me for your wedding, here's some package deals, here's a bit of a discount for not winning this giveaway or whatever it might be. And then I personally, I have no problem kind of tailoring those discounts specifically to the weddings that I do really want to chase, or the weddings that are really local or at venues that I really want to work with. I have no problems kind of making it a better deal for them if there is something coming in my side that could be future beneficial for my business. But yeah, definitely I would be talking to everybody as much as I could. Peter says, what is your thinking process when processing the photos after the day is over? Selection and editing. I think selection, well, the hardest part is just sitting down and editing and selecting. I would say selecting, I very much turn off and I just listen to music and I just kind of go through everything. It's kind of a relaxing process as long as I'm not getting a heck of a lot of notifications on my phone. That doesn't usually take too long. I go through, kind of as I mentioned to Cody's question earlier, I go through and I select everything that I'm going to give to the couple, and then I go through again and I select kind of all of the ones that maybe they'll go on social media or maybe in the future they will. You could also go kind of next level with this, and this is kind of what Lindsay does, is that she'll schedule out her entire pretty much like year in some cases on social media at least a couple of days a week using Later. So she'll go through and she'll pick like, hey, here are 20 images that I want to share from this wedding eventually, and she'll schedule them out so that they'll go out over the next like 2 or 3 or 4 months, because I feel like, at least myself personally, I shoot a wedding, I share a couple images sometimes, and then it's very, very rare that I'll go back to that gallery to continue to share from it. But if you just schedule it out all at one time, that will just continue to come out over the next while and be good. So that's maybe something to consider. As far as editing goes, I also, so I outsource everything. I'm gonna be making a video, I think, in a couple of days about this. Actually, I have a call with Shoot.edit, so maybe stay tuned to see if there's any partnerships formed there. But I outsource everything, so I just set an editor up with at least kind of my profile of like what I want these images edited to. In the past, I've used a company that I don't have them add my preset or edit to the point that I actually want it to be at. I ask them just kind of for a straight, boring, vanilla edit. It comes back to me, and I have a preset that just goes on top of that changes, or that doesn't change the things that they would have changed, but just kind of goes on top and makes the colors as I want them. I've had okay success with that. It works, I would say, well, it obviously works 100% of the time, but I would say it gets me to 95% of what I would have edited to myself. And then I'll go through and I'll just kind of pick some random sections of the gallery that maybe I don't think they're as strong as they possibly could be. So that's kind of my editing process. For if I'm actually editing my own wedding, which I'm actually doing a lot more this year for elopements because they're smaller wedding days, and quite honestly, it takes me as much time to go through a 700 image wedding and deliver 250 of those images than it does to just like put that in a gallery and send it to somebody to edit. My process is that I figure out which preset I'm going to use based on the venue. So if it's nighttime and everything is super warm, I know what preset I'm going to use, and you have access to them. They're all in my 2020 pack now. So I know what presets I'm going to use based on the venue situations usually. And that's kind of my starting point. And I would say when I do that one click, if I shot it mostly right in camera, it's pretty close, like ready to go almost at that point. And I just have to do some minor tweaks, usually exposure and sometimes white balance. But that said, the white balances, or I guess the color palettes that I use in the summer presets as well as the cool presets, the way that they minimize any sort of mixed lighting as best as they possibly can. So sometimes, even if you did get the incorrect white balance in camera, just that one click of the preset will sometimes get it to a point that you're entirely kind of good with it, that you don't really need to go in and change everything to make it exactly what you would have had you been editing in a different way. So that's something that I kind of designed, and something that made my life a heck of a lot easier over time. But yeah, that's about all for that. Jeff says, if you woke up this morning and decided I'd like to start a wedding business, what would be the first 5 to 10 things that you would do? So that is, you remember, so the Book More Weddings 2020 course, that is the thing that is I don't know, that's everything that I would have done. The way that I started that Book More Weddings 2020 course was that, like, hey, if you wanted to start a business from absolute zero in 2020, here's how you become successful. Obviously, this year had different plans for everyone, and it made it a little more challenging, but the principles in those videos, I think, are all, maybe we'll call it Book More Weddings 2021. That if you start doing those things now, I think that they're going to have a massive impact on your 2021 season. Eric says, what's one thing you started doing or learned that improved the quality of your photography? I would say learning lighting as best as I could. That I had a pretty good idea of it. And the thing that actually helped me out a lot was just going into rooms, and in the very beginning, I would just open up the selfie camera and I would just do a little spin around the room, and I would see, like, okay, so this is where I want people facing me over here because this is the nicest light. And I would just do that before anyone came in. I would do that if we were at the church. That's how I would kind of like almost spot check if we were under a tree. Like if we're in a park under a tree, maybe it is in the shade, but there's always the best direction to have everyone facing. So that's kind of how I would spot check that. And I think that was one of the best things that I did. And then maybe, I guess, like historically, getting Lightroom was another thing that really helped me out, because I started, Aperture was a thing. It was an Apple program, and a lot of people were using that, and that was more what Lightroom I guess, like modeled itself after. But prior to that, I was using Photoshop, and I was going through every single individual image, and I was also shooting, I think, JPEG only. I was maybe also shooting the RAWs, but I was editing all of those JPEGs in Lightroom with Actions, my totally rad action pack. And yeah, so my biggest thing, I think, for quality and consistency over time was just switching to Lightroom and working from one preset, or just maybe a few presets that go very nicely together, and not trying to just make the wedding gallery absolutely everything. And then recently, one thing that I guess I did that upgraded quality again was the Canon R6 and the 85-1.2. Being okay to carry that around because it's quite heavy and quite annoying and very expensive. But by bringing that with me, I really do feel like it has helped me a lot. I'll figure out what I officially mean by this, but it has helped me create better images, I think. So maybe something to think about. I think with the Nikon system that I was on, like, I obviously could do work that I was very happy with, but I think that with the 1.2 lens, it's just like with the perfect kind of eye detection as well, that it really does create something that's really, really great. But I'll get back more on that, and if it's actually worth the increase in quality versus the costs and the annoyance of carrying around. John says, when you have Facebook, Instagram ads linking to website to find clients, what should you look for in a good website? What should be the focus? Helpful articles, things that people come to that they actually feel value from rather than just being sold to. There can obviously be the sale. They're obviously like there on your website, and it's very easy for them now to get over to your contact page. So make sure you do have the calls to action at the end, but making those pages in a genuinely helpful way and adding a lot of value to them and their wedding planning experience, and figuring out what you can do and what your specific take is on things to be able to help them the most. And then also putting your kind of mindset as far as what weddings should be into that as well. Because if they connect with that, if they're like, oh cool, like we do want somebody that's candid, that's not like super annoying, high energy all the time, that's just going to kind of fade into the background, and when we're ready to family photos, they'll step in and they'll set everything up. If you can kind of put that into that wording, that's something that's going to hook people in, and they're going to be like, okay, cool, like this is like one good person because they're helping us out, and two, like it seems like we have the same idea of what wedding photography should be. And at that point, they're hopefully going to go to your contact form, and they're not just going to send you a blanket like, hey, what's your pricing? It's going to be more of like, hey, we actually really want to work with you, and maybe you're now top 1, top 2, top 3 of their list of people, rather than just a photographer they reached out to for pricing. Aiden says, what's the best piece of advice you can say to stress the importance about a good second shooter? Find people aren't willing to pay for a second shooter. So the number one thing that I did for, I guess, getting more second shooters hired, so this is speaking from the package sales point, getting people to understand the value of and hiring a second. I told people that package number 3 was my top package, that everybody books this, and a lot of people at that point were like, okay, cool, like we'll do that because that's what everyone else does. And it came with a second shooter, and I feel like that's kind of the way that I went about that, and that was a very easy solution. So hopefully that's like a 3-sentence solution to that. Tell people what package most people go with, and if that includes a second shooter, that's awesome. And then I also just say, as far as I guess now currently in this time, I always hire a second shooter that could also be a main shooter as well. So if anything were to happen, that they could step in my place as an immediate backup. Obviously, you would get more people to come in and help out with that. But like absolute worst case, you have somebody contracted on the day, so they're able to work as a backup in case something were to happen. In the past, I think that this has not really been a problem, but I think now that like wedding morning, if you come down with like a big cough, you're probably like, as dumb as that is, and if it's like allergies or whatever it might be, you can't really go to a wedding right now if you're the coughing photographer, because you're just going to freak everybody out. So I think there is another level of just kind of having backup this year, or any year really going into the future because of this year. Martin says, use a GoPro for wedding highlight videos sometimes. I'm using GoPro 7 Black, but the quality is poor. What settings? So I use I think I used a GoPro 7, so anything you've seen on YouTube, me doing this kind of just like, I have literally a GoPro in my back pocket, and if I ever want to do tracking shots rather than setting up a Steadicam and going out there with the Ronin, what I do is I just use like a couple little tracking shots, walking forwards, backwards, chasing the couple, whatever it might be, from GoPro. I use an 8 now, which I really, really love. A lot of the behind the scenes video stuff you're seeing on YouTube is all from that 8. And I don't think that there's a reason necessarily to upgrade. The 9 is now rumored, so maybe hang out and wait for that 9 to come out before upgrading. Daytime, it's awesome. Nighttime, it sucks. Like as soon as you get inside, even in an environment like this that's pretty well lit, it's still gonna be very difficult. So if you're trying to get those like tracking shots of the couple coming into the venue and like dancing and whatnot, it's going to be really challenging, and you might actually need to set up, get the Zhiyun, the Weeble S. I would say that's the best one, at least that I've found for just very easy to set up and also very lightweight. So if you do want to do the those shots inside, you'll need proper kit. If you're outside, you're in good shade, you're in golden hour, the GoPro is probably going to get you pretty close to what you could do with that, and it's a heck of a lot easier. I use, my Pro Tune is on, and I use GoPro Color. Again, I'm always kind of shooting for the correct, what I want to deliver. And then when I'm in Premiere, I add a LUT that is basically goes over all of my footage, but it kind of makes things a little bit warmer overall, but it's one of the built-in Kodak presets that comes with the Lumetri Lux or whatever. Sorry, I've never been able to pronounce that. I don't even know how to type it into the effects folder to find it. But basically in the color, it comes with a few Kodak and a few Fuji presets, and I just use one of the Kodak ones, and I think it's it makes me happy enough, and I feel like it looks good on all my footage, and it cleans up my footage to look a little bit more cinematic than it would have. Justin says, with tourism ravaged, do you feel like there might be an increased demand for travel content? Yes, I 100% do, and I will be for, I'm gonna say October, I think I said it was going to be. I'm going to redo the How to Travel the World for Nearly Free course, because I feel like, at least over the winter here, if you have time to send out some emails, you're going to be able to make yourself a pretty dang awesome next year as far as travel goes, if you're comfortable doing that. That can also be local travel, that can be in your country, that can be setting up even just like whatever you kind of want to do. This is, unfortunately, this is kind of the year to do it, because you can actually have a hand in helping these places recover, and they know that they need more content than ever before. And if you can make that as easy as possible for them, they're going to be very quick and very happy to say yes, which means that, one, you're now building those relationships to go forward into 2022, 2023, when travel does start to come back, and you're now gonna have those ground level relationships and things that you did that specifically helped, and you can potentially also even get some sort of metrics and tracking on how the content that you created actually did a positive thing for that business through either referral links or even just being able to see how many people click through. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. In October, I'll be releasing that full course again. That's the updated version. I think How to Travel the World for Nearly Free is currently up on the member site. That I would have written in 2017. So I would say it's even kind of, that was when the word influencer was becoming a thing. And I think pre-influencer, what I was kind of doing, not to say that before I became an influencer, this is like kind of before that entire movement kind of happened. What I was doing was that I would just go to a place and I would be like, hey, I know that I can create good value for you and that I can create like these assets. What is a trade that we can do to not cost me the full like week-long stay at your property? Companies were very happy and willing to kind of play ball, especially with somebody that was a professional content creator. I have seen, now that I am friends with a lot of people that are on this side of like the marketing side of things, they are very annoyed by the quote-unquote influencer market that comes in, and they think that their social following and a couple Instagram photos can do a lot for a business, because in reality, like, it's not really doing a heck of a lot for them. But having assets that they can use and they can remarket over time is very valuable for them. So I think that as photographers, as video creators, we have a skill set that talks a lot better to the marketing and to the general manager of a hotel, to a property of an experience. So I think there are some cool opportunities to come, and I will kind of do everything that I can to make that as easy for you guys to hop into if you want as possible. Wes says, Elopements course for ads. Why'd you do a boost rather than creating an ad for the video? So you can go either way. I think they both create the same thing. boosts I usually do just because the video stays alive on my website forever. In the elopements course, the specific example, that doesn't really need to live on forever. I thought it would have been good to show an example of kind of both, because they really can kind of take, the main thing that I'm after is just audience and targeting, and you can do that with either of them. And I find the boosts are a little bit easier to use usually, and they offer you a little bit more visibility. I find that it's very difficult if I do a Facebook ad to find that Facebook ad and to respond to comments. It's a little bit easier, even though pages still suck somehow. I have no idea like how we've got this far and pages are still terrible. But I find it a little bit easier to manage on a page overall. So that's kind of my thought, but there's no right or wrong officially to it. CJ says, do you think age matters to become a wedding photographer? I'm 30 and just getting started. Nah, you're fine. I feel like you can start this career really at any point in time. At 30, I think that you are like you have, I would say, as far as marketing your services to couples, anyone from like 21, 22 to 40 is kind of that like perfect market for you, I think, right now. I think that you have also experience that you're going to attract probably a higher end style of client. So even if it is somebody that's 23, 24 getting married, if they come from a family of means, they're probably looking for a more mature photographer in general. This is kind of generalizing the entire market, but usually they're looking for somebody that has, I don't know, even just by being a little bit older, you appear that you've been in the industry for a very long time. So I think that you have a lot of things going for you, and I don't suspect that it's going to be any sort of a negative thing for you. I think that it's totally fine. But that said, if you are watching this and you're in your like early 20s, that you're going to struggle a lot. So I struggled. I was like 18 when I was trying to do this, and it sucked for a long time because of, one, everybody looked at me as an 18-year-old, and when you're 18, your couples are 23, 24. That is a significant social gap. One that was very challenging for me to get over. But what you do get to do if you're in your early 20s is you get to go through the arc of all of your friends and family, or all of your friends, I guess, getting married. And if you're the best wedding photographer of your kind of that group, you're gonna find almost an instant easy business, and you're not gonna have to work nearly as hard. You're still gonna have to work, but not nearly as hard, just because you are in that age, and that you're going to be a lot more easily accepted by just that group of friends, I guess, getting married and telling their friends, and destination weddings and everything. So there is benefit if you are watching this and you're a little bit younger. Don't be afraid to jump on this too early, because you do get to ride that little boost, and it will set you up for a career that's lasts as long as you want it to. But if you're 30, hopefully you now have the mindset, my younger mindset. I was just trying a bunch of different stuff, and sometimes things worked. As somebody that's 30 right now, I feel like you have a little bit better head on your shoulders, and you can actually market more effectively, and you can select the things that you want to do that you understand will actually have a benefit on your future business. So I think that's good. And then Tom says, I'm almost 60 now, but starting a little bit late. And same goes with like when you're 60, like that there are so many opportunities for different styles of weddings and different couples that people do really look for somebody else. And it also comes down to mindset that, for instance, to speak maybe to Tom quickly, I know a lot of couples that have hired photographers that are of essentially like if their dad was a photographer, they're looking for somebody that's approximate, that like resembles their dad as a photographer, which is kind of a weird thing to say, I guess. But it is something that I have seen. It's a trend that I've definitely seen happening. So at any point in time, there are always ideal couples and couples that will want to go with your services. It's all about just figuring out a way to attract them and to kind of, I don't know, connect with them. But also, I guess the challenge is speaking their language a little bit too, that if they're somebody that is, if you're targeting those 21-year-olds, like social media wise, they're gonna be in a different place than if you're targeting somebody that's 35 or to 40 that's like on Facebook a lot, that you're gonna have to find them in different places. So that's kind of the only thing. We got 4 more questions here, and then I'm going to go and see where our helicopter wedding is at. Cody says, I believe you mentioned that you didn't promote your elopement giveaway besides doing promoted ads. Is there any reason? So I don't do, I would say my organic promotion. So I'm a very, I guess, a mixed use case, because I am a wedding photographer. So if you're seeing anything from my Taylor Jackson photography page, I'm targeting you because you are a potential couple. If I'm posting on Instagram, I would say I'm usually speaking more so to kind of a photography crowd. I know that the majority of my crowd there is at least people that are interested in photography, so I'm speaking a little bit more to that. So you'll notice that my captions, I'll talk about gear and whatnot, which is not something that I would recommend you do if you're trying to attract couples, because they don't care about your gear whatsoever. So I'm very mixed use case. So by me promoting that on my Instagram, I also wanted to see if it worked first before kind of revealing at least some of the secrets to everyone. That if it would have been a failed project, I wouldn't have built this course in the way that I did. So that's kind of why I didn't do it, because it's just, I'm guess like my general reach is a lot more photography driven than couples. But that said, for you and for really everyone else, it's definitely, it makes a lot of sense to promote as organically as you can, as well as through paid as well. Siobhan asks, do you have anything in your contract for right to refuse service to a couple without providing a reason? Do you have to, I don't think you ever have to really provide a reason. And I guess it also depends on what stage in the thing you're at, that if you're 3 emails in and you realize that this couple is going to be extremely high maintenance, that you just don't get along on a core level, that you're not going to do your best work for them, and there is a better photographer out there for them. I would say at that point, usually I'm booked. Sorry, like somebody called and booked your date. If you've already gone through the contract process with it, it's a lot more difficult to separate at that point. There's always, if they also feel that you're not a good fit, there's usually some level of them that they're kind of like, oh, like I wish we could just get out of this contract. And if you offer that at a strategic moment, like that they can be free of this and that you'll give them their money back or whatever it might be, there is a good chance that they might walk away and they might find somebody that's more suited for what they want as a photographer, now that they know that they're feeling some sort of friction, I guess, with you. If there's none of that, if they're just like super happy to have you and they're just kind of the worst, I don't know, I feel like I'm of the mindset that I'll just unfortunately just kind of put up with it, and I'll know that it's kind of that one wedding day. Hopefully they're not emailing you every single day about different things leading up to the wedding. But just knowing it's kind of that one wedding day, and that you're just going to show up, you're going to do the best that you can. You can also flip your mindset a little bit, where rather than photographing the day for the couple, if you're going to a new venue that you really want to start a good relationship with, that you can photograph. One, you got to do a good job for the couple, but for your mindset and for your peace of mind, you can know that you're creating these images for a larger purpose than just the wedding day itself. That's kind of helped me get by in a few days that I've kind of been like, like I wish that they would have just went with someone else. And then other than that, in my contract, there's stuff that, like if you're physically being assaulted, or you can't, like people are spilling water bottles in your camera or whatever, that you can leave at that point. But I would always talk to the couple first before just disappearing. Josh says, thoughts on guest shot delivery? I always feel pressure to deliver more photos of most people at weddings, but kind of waters down the gallery. I don't know who you're using, if you're using Pixieset or Shootproof or PicTime or whatever it might be. On Pixieset, I know for sure that you can create sub galleries. So I would be creating a full gallery of just like every single image and having it as like all images, and then having a second gallery that's maybe just the selects for the couple. So like here's kind of an extended wedding album that's maybe 250 photos, and then having everything and making sure you tell them, because I know that if people come to my Pixieset gallery, that's not the most intuitive thing to be like, oh, there's another tab here with everything. So make sure you tell them that like, hey, everything is in this big gallery, but also within like, kind of here's what I suspect would make a good wedding album. I feel like I would kind of do it that way. I wouldn't split it up by like, here's getting ready shots, here's like all the different parts of the day. I feel like to make it just one gallery and to make your selects based on that, I think it would be pretty good. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. 2 more questions. Orion asks, with styled shoots, how would you go about using them in your portfolio? Do you let people know they're styled or sneak them in as legit? So it depends on how extreme the styled shoot is outside of my usual style. If it's a styled shoot that fits really nicely with my work, I will include those images in my portfolio, but I'll also do a blog post that talks, like obviously tags all the vendors and talks about what the project was. So if they look a little deeper, they can see kind of the full what this was. Same with on Instagram. I'll mention if it's like a styled shoot, thanks so much for all these people for helping out. I don't try to hide it, but I think that if it's a good image and it kind of is what your brand and what you want to be, if that is in your main portfolio, I think that's totally fine. I know other photographers might take a negative stance on this, that if you workshop image, it does not belong on your website. But I think if you shot it, especially if you're the one that styled the shoot, like if you put that shoot together, if you selected the location, if you selected wardrobe, if you like if you had a big part of it, I feel like it definitely belongs on your website. So yeah, that's how I would do that. Make a big post about like, hey, like here's the situation. And then also just tagging everyone that was involved, I think is key too. Last question today. How can I learn poses and instruct? The moment I'm in front of a couple, my mind gets blocked and then I refer to my phone. So I would say what I did, at least to get kind of over this, was that I had a little flip book of photos. You can use your phone now, obviously. But when I was sitting in my car before the shoot, I would be looking through images. On a wedding day, I'd be looking through all the getting ready images and being like, okay, these are all the photos that I need to take. So when I did get in front of couples and when I did get into the room, then at least I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do. As far as actually freezing with couples, I feel like the way that I kind of get over it is that I'll have them hold hands and just walk away, and that'll buy me enough time. So if I'm like, I don't know what to do next, looking around, I'm like, oh, just hold hands and walk that way, and then I'll tell you to turn around at some point. And they walk away, and I'm like scouting around, like taking some photos, but also just making sure that like I know what I'm going to be doing next. I feel like it's also kind of interesting. Sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you kind of get almost like a half idea, and you're like, oh, like let's go to this wall, and you're like, crap, this doesn't work at all. How do I make this work for like one single photo? And I feel like that pushes your creative boundary a little bit as well. And then I feel like being one, obviously like technically just super comfortable with your equipment is also another thing that when you don't have to think too much about that, you can focus a little bit more on the situation. And then another thing I think is that I really look for what my couples do kind of naturally. And I've noticed that if they're doing something, you can't just be like, stop, don't move, stay as you are, because then they'll be like, what? Oh yeah, okay, photo. What I've noticed is that if I'm just kind of at the very beginning of the shoot, if they see that I'm shooting candid stuff of them kind of throughout the process, like for instance, if we're walking to the first location and I'm shooting photos of like them holding hands or something, they know that that candid element is kind of part of the day. So if we're just like hanging out on a street corner waiting for the light to turn or whatever, if I'm just grabbing a few photos of them, they won't think that that's weird after maybe a 15-minute warm-up period, and they'll just like have more so be themselves. And I find that I get the most natural images out of that. And I feel like couples wise, it makes this the bridge getting over from being super uncomfortable to becoming medium, okay, comfortable a lot faster. And then maybe one last thing I'll touch on is that I don't pose too heavily in the very beginning. So when I come into the day, we'll speak specifically to engagement sessions, I meet the couple in a parking lot. The first pose, I'm gonna keep it as easy as possible. I'm gonna get them to hold hands, walk that way, walk back this way, put an arm around each other, smile, face the camera. And if they do that, they already feel a little bit more autonomy so that they're able to kind of do whatever, that within reason, they're able to kind of be themselves. If I set up the first like 3 or 4 shots and it's like, okay, you put an arm here, smile, chin up this way, elbow down, like arm this, they're going to expect that from the rest of the shoot. So don't try to overpose in the very beginning or offer too many really tactile specific suggestions. I think that if you can keep things as easy as possible for the first 5 minutes, that you'll find that a lot of your couples at some point will naturally just kind of start doing stuff and being themselves. And at that point, it becomes a lot easier that you can be like, okay, cool, you guys you do, like when you hug, that looks really nice. So let's like reiterate that in a few different ways, in a few different locations. So those are my jumbled mess of ideas, but preparing as much as you can, knowing your gear and not taking too much control really early on, I find does help out a lot. That is all for today. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions to submit, I will be posting another topic, maybe like Monday, Tuesday of next week, and then I will actually do that on Wednesday because there's no camera releases this week that I'm aware of. So to submit a question, first you have to be a member of the website, and then you have to come to our members group. And if you're in there, you can submit your questions. And then also the $100 image challenge winners this week as well. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm hoping there's a helicopter wedding today. I will check my phone to see. Let's find out. Nope. No updates yet. We leave in 3 hours. I'll go find out more. See you next time.